Let's go to a listener question that we received. And David Orochena asks, this is regard to shifting or the potential shift to a 4-3 defense. David asks, why would the Steelers shift to a 4-3 with TJ Watt? Can you explain how that would accentuate his skills?
Yeah, David. So 4-3, technically, your two down defensive ends don't need their hands in the dirt. And I've seen TJ Watt put his hands in the dirt. You know, TJ Watt, coming out of college, he had his hands in the dirt. So that's what you got to understand. Now, he had to adjust himself on being a stand-up outside linebacker in the 3-4. But TJ Watt can do both. He can put his hand in the dirt or he can stand up. And it just depends on the Coach Tom to give him that leeway. And I think Coach T will give him that leeway, whether you're in the 3-4 or the 4-3. He can be like, TJ, whichever one you're comfortable with, you can use any technique you want to. So, yes, I'm glad you asked that question. But a guy like TJ Watt, who can pretty much play any scheme, whether it's a 4-3 or 3-4, whether it's his hand in the dirt or he's standing up, it really don't matter to him.
Yeah, and I think I don't even look at Watt because we know what he can do as a pass rusher and also making plays in the backfield. He's not just a pass rusher. Mm-hmm. But I look at what are the other things the Steelers would need to do if they do, in fact, change defensive fronts. And so I think it would involve either getting Tyson Alualu and Stephon Tuitt back or going to the draft or signing a free agent defensive tackle to shore up the middle and get Cam Hayward some help. And what I mean by that is just really more depth so you can make sure that whoever ends up playing at the defensive tackle position or nose tackle in, say, a 1 technique or a 0 technique directly over the center or in the A gap, that there's some stability on the interior of the defensive line. Reason being, this was a Steelers defense that allowed the most rushing yards in the league in the 2021 season.
Yeah, you got to get a big boy in the middle. You got to get a plug in the middle. Regardless on whether it's a 3-4 or 4-3, that's just what Pittsburgh, I think, is going to do in the draft. They're going to get him a plugger, an athletic plug in the middle who can hold the fort down, who would give opportunities for Cam so he won't be getting pressured so much, who would give opportunities for Stephon Tuitt when he comes back to be able to roam a little bit. So, yeah, they might go 5 down linemen sometimes. You just never know depending on the drafts and how they feel. Especially with the mastermind of Coach T and Coach Brian Flores, you know, the defensive specialist now. So they're going to mix. They're going to do a little bit of everything when it comes down to fronts and disguising and just mixing the defense up depending on who they play. But, yeah, I really do think they're going to mix in that 4-3 defense because that's what Coach T, he first in a lot of stats when we was doing real good when he was at Minnesota. Second in a lot of stats when it came down to the running game when the Pittsburgh Steelers was doing real good. And he was the defensive coordinator in Minnesota. He was a dog at that 4-3. And he had 2 studs sitting in the middle at the 4-3. And I'm not saying he's going to go to the 4-3. I just think he's going to use more of a 4-3 when it comes down to fronts for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you have to get 2 athletic big D tackles or nose tackles to be able to run that defense. And I think they're going to answer some of them calls in the draft, Mark.
You mentioned adding depth at the defensive tackle position. Ike, what are some of the difficulties in shifting base defensive formations? Because traditionally the Steelers are a 3-4 defense.
Yeah, so it's now the linebackers, you know. So in a 4-3, you know, you got four backers. You got the Mike, the Buck, the Will, and the Sam. So that's 4 linebackers, and you only got 3 D linemen. And in a 4-3, you got four D linemen and 3 linebackers. So if you was to switch, you know, you wouldn't want TJ Watt to be an outside linebacker, you know, a traditional outside linebacker, somebody who's covering, you know, a tight end or a running back coming out the backfield. Nah. The specialist of TJ Watt is getting to the damn quarterback. You know, it's past the teams that he's played. So you would still keep him on the defensive line. So now you go on the draft because Pittsburgh is also looking at linebackers in the draft as well. You know, you get your young studs in the draft who was able to run. So you had guys like Devin Bush before he, you know, had this injury. Hopefully this year he would be 10 times better than last year. because it's a couple of years after his injury that he'll get back to what he once was. And that was covering tight ends, running backs coming out the backfield. Your Ryan Shazier kind of body type guys. You know, your guys who can pretty much do it all. That's what Pittsburgh is going to look for. So in my mind, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to get D tackles and they're going to get linebackers, young linebackers who are able to run. And when you do that, and just my thought process, you're going to work some of your fronts off the 4-3 defense, not the traditional 3-4 defense. Even though the 3-4 defense is very complicated for a lot of offensive guys and offensive linemen to decipher, especially on the go. Once you say hut, that's why everybody run it. You have to have that personnel for it. And Pittsburgh does a good job on drafting personnel for that 3-4 defense. But I know since Coach Bus is gone, Coach T, this is his defense, that 4-3. He's been dominant when he was DC at Minnesota in that 4-3. And I think they're going to shed a little bit of that 4-3 in that Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
Yeah, Minnesota and Tampa Bay, that classic cover 2 with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. Ike, you mentioned Ryan Shazier, someone we had on the pod late last year. Could you imagine this defense with both TJ Watt and Ryan Shazier? Like, oh man, like that's a great what if he were still healthy, what Ryan he would be doing on this defense right now.
I mean, you would have had Ryan Shazier and Devin Bush. I mean, come on, man. I mean, Ryan came out of Ohio State running the 4-3 as a linebacker. And we all see where he was headed before his injury, but God had different plans for him. Devin Bush, when he was healthy, we all saw what he was doing. Old school Pittsburgh Steelers smacking people in the face, running with everybody. So I think Pittsburgh wants to get back to that, especially at that linebacker position. You got to have linebackers who cover nowadays. And they hoping and wishing Devin Bush this year will get back to the old Devin Bush. But I think in my mind, they will draft another young outside linebacker who will be able to run with these young tight ends and these running backs. And don't forget, man, I still like Spillane. I feel like Spillane needs an opportunity to showcase. I feel like this is his time as well at that linebacker position. He's another old school, hard-nosed Pittsburgh Steeler, kind of guy. A guy who wants to smack people in the face and just loves football. That's what you want with your linebackers. I need smart, fast, aggressive, violent linebackers. And I think Spillane is one of them. So you get Spillane, Devin Bush. If you want to go to the 4-3, you get Spillane, Devin Bush, and another young stud. You got action.
Yeah, with Spillane, I love his physicality. It's the pass coverage that there needs to be improvement upon. He's still a young player, though, too. And I Bleav he's due to hit free agency as well. So we'll see if the Steelers, in fact, retain him moving forward.